Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself? I got an interesting email this week.
And the email was from a listener who started with me on day one. And he says, Carol, I'm single, and I lost my family to sexual addiction. And when I'm experiencing the fear of COVID, it feels very much like the loss that I experienced with sexual addiction. Do you have any helpful tips for me? Why would I feel this way? Well, the truth of the matter is, of course it feels very similar. I hear that from addicts and partners both. Because whenever there's been a loss, you experience it, and then the next loss that occurs couples on or layers on top of the next loss, and the next loss, and the next loss. And so when something catastrophic like a divorce occurs, or when something catastrophic like COVID occurs, you're going to feel those same feelings, only magnified. And so I am not surprised that you're feeling this way. And I am so sad because what I know is that you have to peel away the layers and look at the loss and ask yourself, okay, now how can I grow stronger from this, and what do I have to learn from it? And I said I'm sad because so many people stay stuck in the loss. They don't move forward. And good recovery means you move forward. You figure out what you need to do to make it better. And when you figure it out, when you say to yourself, how am I stronger? What do I have to learn from this? And what you realize is you've taken yourself out of that victim role, and you've become more than a survivor, become a thriver. You see, if you don't do it, you may stay in the victim role. And if you gain some strength, then you're going to feel like a survivor. But if you can be empowered by the loss and learn something from it and grow stronger, then guess what? You are a thriver. And I know it will never necessarily bring back your family, I know that if you've had a catastrophic health illness, it's not necessarily going to erase that. I know with COVID, right, still reason to be very cautious. I won't say concerned, but I will say cautious. Then maybe concerned. I wouldn't be consumed, though. I absolutely refuse to be consumed by COVID. Then it means it really has won. Think back to 9/11. And when 9/11 occurred, we had to tell ourselves that we were not going to succumb to the victim mentality where they had us on high alert and we couldn't lead a normal life. So, as sex addicts and betrayed partners, you get the choice as to how you respond to any catastrophe. If you're divorced, you get the choice to say, how am I going to make this work with my ex-spouse? How am I going to promote my life for the betterment of my children? And I'm always telling my couples, whether they're divorced or together, you get to choose emotional maturity. You have a choice, and that is amazing that we all have choices. Because what's my number one coaching principle as a mental health therapist? I know you all know this. I'm 100% responsible and accountable for my behavior. And that's why I was really excited to be able to interview Dr. Larry Walman. He is an author of, I think it's 7 books, but he just put out another book that we're going to be talking about today. It just sounds really exciting. The book itself is about how to stay healthy and how to really work on your relationship and what to do about that. And it is important that we take a look at what is happening to us and decide how we can show up with integrity. His book, Love Your Child More Than You Hate Your Ex, is getting rave reviews. And he's going to be talking about how do you handle an angry spouse, how do you deal with that trauma. And since we have over half of U.S. marriages failing, and most of them involving children, I thought you might want to hear what the experts said about how to make fine and sad situation the best possible. So I'm going to welcome Dr. Larry Walman to the show. Thank you for joining us on Sex Help with Carol the Coach.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, and you are a clinician, you're a psychologist, you actually deal in forensic psychology, and so you have really had experience with the courts and with legal battles, and you have made it your mission to write about how people can get along. So tell me, first of all, how did you get involved in this business?
Well, I've been a long-term psychologist. Actually, I started in practice, believe it or not, in 1979. And at that time, I worked largely with children and families. Prior to that, I was a school psychologist for 7 years. And so, of course, I became very familiar with working with kids and their families and consulting with teachers and so on. And my private practice began, as I said, end of the 70s into the 80s and so on. And I also got involved with a psychiatric hospital around in the later 80s and so on. And that worked very well, and my practice was humming along fine until managed care raised its ugly head, if you will. in the later 80s and then of course into the 90s, and it really put stress on my practice. Frankly, I just wasn't getting compensated the way I was before, and there were too many restrictions on what I could do with my clients. For example, I did a lot of evaluations, and and now with managed care, back in those days, I had to jump through so many hoops to do what I thought was a necessary evaluation. So basically, I had to kind of remake my practice. And starting in the mid-90s or so, I decided that I was going to move into the legal or forensic area. And so I took some courses, some workshops, found a mentor, and then basically began working with the court. I probably did in the neighborhood of 75 to 100 custody evaluations. I also was a parenting coordinator. That was something that was relatively new, I think, at the time in the later 90s, where a judge would appoint a professional to a couple who had just been given their final decree, but the judge thought that the couple was likely to continue fighting. So instead of just coming back to court and filing motions on a regular basis, the judge ordered that they had to work with the professional before they could get back to court. Mm-hmm. I was also a therapeutic interventionist, where, again, I was appointed by the court to help parents who were estranged from their children, or maybe actually had abandoned them at one time, but now wanted to reconnect. So from the inside, if you will, I came to see what it was like for families, and particularly for kids, to go through the divorce process. I did that then from the early 90s, or mid 90s to when I retired in late 2015.
And one of the things I know, it's so ironic that we're talking, because I started out in the field of child psychiatry, and I worked with an incredible forensic psychologist who is now deceased, but he really helped me to see how, if we could at the hospital level, because we were an outpatient clinic, but we were part of a children's hospital, if we could help them get along, then it didn't have to go to court, or the court proceedings didn't need to be so long. So let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, you have tools and tips for spouses that are angry, that are battling each other, and unfortunately, the kids are the casualty. What kinds of things do you tell parents when they're fighting this?
Well, your introduction was right on. I say very similar kinds of things, that they still have their responsibility to maintain their composure, and to do so not so much because they love their ex now, but because they still love their kids. I make the point that as a parent, married or not, divorced or not, the primary definition of that is that you put your needs secondary to those of the child. We've all been there as parents. Sleepless nights because the child is sick, sleepless nights because the child is having their own problems, et cetera, et cetera. Spending money that we really don't have, but to do something that you believe the child deserves or needs. I could go on and on. So that's important. And it was my experience that in some cases, fortunately not all, but that in some cases, some parents became so angry and so frustrated with the divorce process that they forgot their role as a parent, and now their anger and frustration became foremost ahead of the needs of the child. And so the parent is now emoting on a regular basis, acting out and so forth, creating scenes with their partner in the company of their children and so forth, and that is causing significant trauma for children. So again, we have to maintain our composure. We have to remember we're doing this for the sake of our children. I heard an analogy a while ago that I think applies very well. And what this person said, suppose you're on an airliner, which of course we're not doing much of today, but suppose you're on an airliner, and you decide to use the restroom, at the front of the plane near the cockpit. And as you approach that airline restroom, you hear through the cockpit door the pilot and the co-pilot arguing ferociously, yelling at each other. You don't know what you're doing, and this and that and so forth. How would that make you feel?
I would be scared to death, and I would think my life was in danger.
Absolutely. I mean, here it is. These two people hold your lives in their hands, and now they're sounding like crazy people, arguing and so forth that way, screaming and yelling. Well, that's a good analogy, because I contend, that's how it makes our kids feel. When they see their parents arguing and screaming and so forth, like that pilot and co-pilot, it makes them feel very frightened, very scared, very out of control, and so on. And we have to avoid that whenever we can.
And so, oftentimes, especially with sexual addiction, my program is about sex addicts and partner betrayal. And I have to tell you, most of the sex addicts that I work with want recovery, and they want to do it right, and they actually work hard on that. I'm not saying they do it perfectly, but, they do it. And then there's the partner, and maybe it was too much betrayal. She couldn't handle it. Maybe he had some slips or relapses, and she said, this is not how I want to live my life. More often than not, as a matter of fact, I don't think in my 10 years of doing this have I ever met an addict that divorced his wife. It's the partner that says, I can't do this. I didn't mean to show up for this. I got to get out of this. And so he's understandably upset, and she's not only angry, understandably, it's one of the worst betrayals in the world, but she's afraid, and she's afraid for herself, and she's afraid for her kids, because now this means he's going to have some, hopefully he's going to have a relationship with those kids that she's not going to be able to monitor or supervise. And so tensions are high conflict, and she is very defensive. And so what would you tell her? Because obviously she has this trauma, but at the same time, you're spot on when you say kids know what's going on. They may not understand why it's going on, but they feel that tension and that conflict. What would you tell her?
Well, first, of course, like any good therapist, you would empathize, just as you described. Certainly, her concerns are justified. At the same time, though, unfortunately, she doesn't have a choice in most cases. In the situation you described, the husband may not have been a good partner. That doesn't necessarily mean that he was a bad parent, and that he can't parent his children appropriately. And as long as that's the case, then she's going to have to accept that and deal with it. Now, of course, there are certain situations. I mean, if he's putting the kids in compromised situations, well, then that's what going back to court is all about. But if not, she may have to learn to accept it and deal with it.
Yeah, and that is so important. It is that acceptance piece, as well as teaching kids how to stay safe. And, typically her immediate fear is that the children may see pornography on his laptop or his phone. And then sometimes it even goes as far as she's afraid that he's going to expose the kids to affair partners or prostitutes or massage people, people in the sex industry. And so you're basically saying it's on a continuum, and there's some things she may have to accept, and then there's some things that she will have to take to court to have them help determine, are these kids at risk?
Exactly. There are some things that are unacceptable, and as you described, if the ex is engaging in some of those behaviors with in the company of the children and so forth, yes, the court will react to that. And either curb the visitations or require a monitor or a supervisor or things along those lines until the court is satisfied that those kinds of behaviors are going to cease.
And again, helping her to determine when that might need to happen. I mean, we always say in these kind of high conflict situations, we really do want partners and sex addicts alike to go to specialists that understand their condition and perhaps can mediate or negotiate before an official mediator occurs. But that acceptance part is so important with psychoeducation. I mean, I know that when I worked in abuse, one of the things that I did was I helped the kids to know what good boundaries were so that they knew how to keep themselves physically safe, and they knew what they could do if that didn't occur and who they could talk to about that. And boundaries are so important in these kind of situations. I'm talking with Dr. Larry Walman, and he is an expert on so many things. He's written 7 books, but his current book, tell us a little bit about that and what made you write that.
So sure, thank you. In my head for many years, as I said earlier, I retired from active practice in the end of 2015, but I still teach, consult, write, and speak, and so forth. But I intended, even then, when I retired, to get this book out. But life got in the way. There were a lot of things I did. I developed a speaking practice and so forth. Actually, I wrote another book in the interim entitled "Overcoming Your Negotiophobia" with a co-author. But when I finally settled into writing this book, the actual writing just just flowed. I probably got the writing done in 3 to 4 months because I had already taken lots of notes on articles and things like that, and so it was something I really wanted to get out because I know it is so needed. I've seen so many families struggle with this divorce process, I think needlessly, to be honest. And, of course, I've seen hundreds of kids get caught up in this meat grinder, as I call it, of an acrimonious divorce. And so therefore I felt I needed to get this out to help as many people as possible.
You know, I really admire you, and I'll tell you why. I did start out in child psychiatry, and one of the most lucrative jobs you could have was being a mediator. And I thought, there is no way that I want to be between two fighting adults that hate each other, that are getting a divorce, that can't make it work for the sake of the kids. And so you're really being preemptive and proactive and helping parents figure it out in a way that it makes so much sense. I just really appreciate everything that you are doing and wonder, how can people get your book?
Well, they thank you for asking, of course. If they want to go online, they can have choices then of how they wish to purchase it, whether they want the the not the hardcover, but the paperback or the e-version. They can go to outskirtspress.com/lovingyourchildmorethanyohateyourEx. And from there, they'll have their various choices of what version they'd like to purchase. If
that's right. And
go ahead.
Go. Well, I was going to say, and I want to remind our listeners that you have written some and other books, Who's Raising Whom, or Coping with Your Adolescent, or How Come I Love Him But Can't Live With Him. I love the title of that. The Graduate Course You Never Had, Too Busy Earning a Living to Make Your Fortune, and last but not least, and I'd love to hear a little bit about this, Overcoming Your Negotiaphobia. So I'm assuming that relates to people that just don't have that ability to negotiate and compromise. Is that right?
Yes, largely. I wrote that with a colleague of mine. He's a business analyst. He does lots of coaching of managers and employees and so forth. And basically what we did is we talked about how the ability to negotiate in your life is so important in the home and in the business world. So the book is interesting because I obviously dealt with the home issues. So talked about negotiating with your partner, negotiating with your kids, negotiating with your friends, and so on, your coworkers. And then my co-author, he focused on negotiations in actual business deals and so forth. So yes, that book's done fairly well, and again, I think we've helped lots of people. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I want to remind people that if they want to find you, that they can go to and here's how this works, topphoenixpsychologist.com. That is actually your website, correct?
That's correct. Yes. On that, I have many of my articles, and, of course, my books are available, too.
And so people can get some help just by going to your website, and that is so important. And, obviously, you have made it your mission. There is no better principle when I'm talking with couples and talking about emotional IQ. I say you've got to be able to negotiate and compromise. And those two skills are essential when working in a healthy relationship and in working with an unhealthy relationship. I want to ask you, Dr. Larry, how often do you encourage somebody to just let the other person have the choice? How often do you do that?
Well, a lot. I used to counsel that on a regular basis. In fact, it became one of my preferred tactics, if you will, in marital therapy, because frequently I would be with a couple that were struggling with an issue. For example, I think I give two examples in the book. One is frequency of sex, and the other one is money management. Let's say. Let's focus on that one for the moment. And the typical case is the wife, according to the husband, is spending money frivolously, and so on. And so the husband responds by trying to curb her spending and monitor her, and et cetera, which of course does not go over very well. And the wife, in turn, begins to passively, aggressively oppose him, and so we have a mess going on. I remember I had a case where this woman would go shopping and come home and keep the clothes in the trunk of her car and wait for her husband to leave for work or wherever, and then very quickly run into the car, grab the clothes, get them out of her trunk, get rid of the tags and so forth, and hang them up in her closet so he would never see it until, of course, the credit card bill came a month later. But she'd fight that fight then. But one of the moves that I often suggested is to recommend that the wife take over the bill paying. And whenever I would say that, they would both look at me like, "Is this guy crazy?" That doesn't make any sense. Here it is. She's mismanaging the money. Give her control. And more often than not, what occurred is just the opposite, is that when the wife had the control, and now it was up to her to manage the money, go shopping if she chose, but she also had to negotiate the bills. And when she saw what her behavior was causing, more often than not, she got in line.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? We tell parents to do that for kids too, right? If they're having trouble with responsibility, give them a different type and see if they can't run with it. Sure,
absolutely. Kids will always be willing to let you take on that responsibility. I see parents all the time are driving themselves ragged. I can't tell you how many times in my career I heard parents say, I have to get up every morning and get that kid out of bed. I just have to drag him out of bed, and it's so painful and so forth. And I say, why? Well, what do you mean? He's going to be late for school. And I said, yeah. Well, that wouldn't be good. The grades would suffer. The school would call. I said, yeah. And finally, it dawns on them, they're taking responsibility for, the child's own behavior. We're talking a teenager, sometimes maybe 2-3 years away from moving out on their own. When are they going to learn to get up on their own? It better be pretty soon. How about now? And let them see the consequences of their ways.
Right, and when the consequences get great enough, they get going. But they have to be great enough. So I really, really appreciate everything that you are doing for the community at large. I'm talking with Dr. Larry Walman. You can look at his website, which, by the way, has the most amazing picture of Phoenix on it, www.topphoenixpsychologist.com. And it's interesting because I got certified in Phoenix. They have the largest sexual addiction institute in the world. And so Phoenix is a very special place for both myself and many of our listeners because the premier institutes that actually has sex addiction recovery centers are right there in close to Scottsdale and Phoenix. So you're in a very wonderful place. I can imagine it must be pretty hot right now.
Yes, although we had a nice streak here, but I think today the high will be about 105.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's here it is. It's Memorial Day weekend. I appreciate you coming on the show. I want to remind people your 7th book, Love Your Child More Than You Hate Your Ex, is getting rave reviews, and it really is important when you're in a stressful situation. Addicts, I know that you're in a stressful situation, and partners, equally so. Why don't you get this book and take a look at some of the guidelines that may help this process go smoother, because you want to do what's in the best interest of your children. And Larry, I just thank you so much for being on this show and continued success.
Well, thank you. Do appreciate the opportunity.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so that was Larry Walman, Ph.D. Obviously has a lot of gifts to give the world. And, hey, thanks for listening to us. I said it's Memorial Day weekend, but the truth of the matter is by the time you hear this, it will be on one of my vacation days. So Larry was so kind to record this early, and we're going to play it not this Monday, but next Monday, and that I think is June 1st, as you well know, because you'll be hearing it then. So as I say to you at all times, I want you to fearlessly have the courage to be yourself, because there will only be one of you at all times. And the other thing I want you to do is show up with a lot of integrity, because when you show up with integrity, you feel good about yourself no matter what. Have a good day.